Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell, and with me, as always, is Dr. Brian Wolf. And today we are going to be talking AI. So, Brian is in a fortunate position as a bigger fish in the physical therapy market that he gets hit up a lot by a lot of people in the technology space because for someone at scale, with his 5 clinics, and then he's part of another, he's a partner in another company that's got 19 clinics, I think. Um,
20 now.
the AI people really want to talk to him. So he's getting pitched stuff all the time. And we popped on this podcast and he's like, I got to talk about what's going to happen in PT in the next 5 years. Cause I just got out of this meeting. I saw this technology and I think it's going to completely change. So I'll let Brian run with it a little bit, but this is something that, you know, is kind of at the forefront. Everyone's thinking, how is AI going to actually make stuff better? So hopefully this podcast will help you guys kind of see into the future a little bit, if you're a big or small clinic, and then hopefully, pick up some tips. So Brian, go ahead, go tell us, what's what you're thinking, right? Well, first I'll plug our group, right?
Yeah,
Physio group, right?
I'll give. So this is what Owen's talking about. It actually was kind of interesting. Was he was talking about how AI in the past and people are really interested in AI and what it's going to do for us and how's it going to help physical therapy. Well, if you join our group in physio-growth.com, you can hear more specifically about different companies. I won't drop company names. I won't drop prices. I'm not going to do any of that stuff to these. I'm not trying to. I'd love it if they pay us for sponsorship, then I'll do it. But in terms of a aspect of the stuff we do in our group in physio-growth or physio-growth.com, right, is essentially what we're trying to do is help people start their businesses, grow their businesses, scale their businesses, sell their businesses. So if you're somebody, or again, try and create side hustles, it can be in any competitive piece. But if you're trying to learn more about how the evolution of physical therapy is going to go, what we're going to do, mentorship, masterminds, check us out, physio-growth.com. So to kind of launch into what Owen was talking about, what he's always asked me, kind of like we've talked about AI in the past in some different ways, like chat GPT and copywriting and things along those lines. But this is the last couple of weeks that I've really been excited about some of the actual like things that are going to solve problems within our business that we're having. And then also from a perspective of actually building, ROI and what they actually will do for us and making us money. And then it will have an impact in what clinics look like down in the future. So that's going to be
well,
very interesting as well.
and that's my biggest question, right? As a skeptic, is yeah, AI is great, right? But it just writes at this point, it writes a term paper faster than I will, right? And everybody
Yeah.
knows that AI wrote it, right? So like that's as a single solopreneur on my own, that's how it helps my business, right? So the big thing with AI is always, will it actually solve? We know what it is, we know what it does, the tech is fine, but like, does it actually make my life easier? So like,
Yeah.
you're saying that you're seeing stuff that will actually like save you money, make your life
Yeah.
easier, like not just write a nicer Instagram
Yeah.
caption.
So I'm going to talk about 3 different AI systems that are occurring and what I think and what they can do now and what I think will be kind of like the evolution in the next 5-10 years, right?
Okay.
So essentially, the first one that we're implementing is actually in a billing system. So if you can imagine, so we're switching billing companies, in the beginning in the next couple months, and one of the things that we're doing with that switch is the reason we're switching is because we think about insurance-based models, a lot of denials, authorizations, things along those lines, right? Well, where AI is going to plug in here is into this billing company. They talk to us to go, what our company will do for you, and what it can do is if things get flagged, right? So, if things get flagged, like, oh, this code. So, for instance, one of the things we noticed was S codes, right? The insurance companies are bopping back a lot of S codes. So we can tell our therapist, hey, don't do that. Don't use S codes. Or if you're going to use S codes, make sure there's layered with an M code or something else with the ICD-10 codes. Well, say they shoot that note off. All of a sudden, AI will say, hey, this is actually a note that's going to get denied. And instead of having to wait the 30, 60, 90 days to get that note back, to us to actually have to fix it and do all those human error pieces, the AI will actually flag it and will send it back to us. And so then we know where we have to make changes. When it comes down to, it'll tighten the loop on how people are getting paid, so to really help cash flow. The other aspect of what's interesting is think about billing companies. So instead, that's all humans that had to do that. So now suddenly humans don't have to do it at all. And so ultimately, you're going to actually cut down costs. So we actually can save some money here too. So the billing company can charge us less. So what's happening is they're disrupting this market by saying, hey, and this is the piece, will AI take jobs? If people aren't figuring out how to use it, yeah, because people who will stick around are the people who can integrate and interact with it, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first part, is the billing side. I think I can definitely see the impact it's going to have on some of the X's and O's and some of the, more mundane stuff, to, doing more billing and getting us more data analytics driven around that stuff. That's the first step. And that's really exciting for a company of our size. Think about Athletico. If they can cut down, paying 6% to 3%, right? All of a
Yeah.
sudden it's a monster
Millions.
to the bottom line. Yeah, millions of
Yeah.
dollars. So we're at a size now where it's not, I wish I could tell you it was millions, but in terms of like where we're at now at 20 clinics, that's a significant number. Plus you're going to improve our cash flow. And like that, again, moving a whole billing company is a disaster from a standpoint of, we're terrified from all the different things we have to do, but it makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense to implement AI. Now,
Yeah.
where that's also headed is where I'm going to talk about the second company that I talked with the other day. And I think that this first company can do it. So I think a lot of these companies will start to overlap, right, as
Yeah.
well. But this one, what it does is basically it says, hey, when you actually go in from a standpoint of like, it's trying to do automation. So intake, say a patient, right, comes in and it finds a landing page of your website, it can go on and request. Well, an AI assistant is going to call you. It's going to talk to you. It's going to ask you about your insurance, ask you about the different products. It's going to schedule you. It's going to schedule in the EMR, and then essentially it's going to just get them so that they'll show up. It can also nurture them as well. So that kind of goes to my third one, but I won't tease that one yet. So, and people will say, well, how does the AI do that? Blah, blah. It's not human voice. It's going to sound, let me tell you something about some of these AI voices I've been hearing these last times. These are crazy. They have
Yeah.
names. They have names like
Well,
Ryan and Trixie, and like they sound so real, guys. Like it's crazy.
well,
So like
well,
what's
you
interesting?
played some. You played some for me,
Yes,
and
it is.
I mean,
Exactly.
yes. If you were saying, "Can you tell if this is AI?" Right?
Yes.
Then yeah, my ears perked for it. Of course, I'm going to be listening for it. But like somebody who just calls you, out of the blue, it sounded exactly the same. So
It's
I
very
think this
human
is
like.
yeah, and I think this is like the important part of that these two things that you're talking about is that it's taking the tasks that take time, right? That take people that you can't just do, sending somebody a text message, and it's just making them so it just happens every hour of the day. They don't need breaks. They show, they're open at 1 a.m. They're open at 1 p.m. Right? And obviously, this is what everyone kind of talks about with like AI taking jobs, right?
Yep.
Well, I always think, Excel took jobs too, right? If you ever look at accountants, there were people in
Yeah.
accounting firms that all they did was putting figures down. Like they called it figuring. That's why they say like figuring something, right? And they would go and they lost their jobs because of Excel, right? But then they learned something different. So this is, the nice part is this is not taking the PT out, right? Where, you got to go all the way back to school. You spent 7 years. This is somebody that, it's an entry level job for a lot of people, or it's a job that's customer service based that they can go somewhere else, maybe a company that's not doing this. So it's a really good way for owners to be more efficient, but it's also, you know, the hope is customers will start seeing this a lot more, and it'll be less kind of like, oh crap, I'm talking to an AI. It'll be much more fluid.
Well, PTs are going to be fine, right? So that's the first thing I would say. If you're a physical therapist, like we're going to be fine, because the reality is like hands-on work cannot be done properly by an AI. At least not right now, right?
Yeah.
So this is going to make stuff more efficient in the aspect of like we were talking about, like they'll call the patient, they'll book them, they'll verify their insurance, they'll get it all set up. So in theory, it should actually reduce the barrier for people who are cash based, who are like, how do I make the insurance jump? This should actually really help you,
Yeah.
because in theory, the cost is going to be far less than hiring an employee or two, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, then you're getting to a billing side of it where the billing will actually be way less expensive, which is nice too. So you won't be taking a chunk out on that front. So the
Well, I'm already
aspect,
thinking, when sorry to cut you off, but like
yeah,
that's the first thing when anyone says, "Oh, are you going to go to are you going to do brick and mortar?" I was like, "Oh crap! Well, I'm going to have to hire a medical biller and a front office, right?" Like those
yeah,
are the two big things I already think about when I need to do that.
AI will be able to do both those things. That's what's
Yeah.
crazy. So in theory, like for Owen, that jump will be much easier. And so I
Yeah.
mean, I wish that it was around when we were doing that, because like instead of hiring front desk people and going through that headache and paying, I mean, minimum wage now, like we used to pay front desk people $15 an hour, but that was 10 years ago. Now minimum wage in Connecticut's over 16.50. So the reality is like, and no one accepts that. That was when minimum wage was, we could pay 15 when minimum wage was $8. But now in this economy, like you're paying people $20 plus and more and more and more, right? So
Mhm.
the reality is AI is going to replace that stuff. That's what's going to happen. And so That's the next piece. And then what's crazy, we didn't even get to it yet, but that same software that can call, schedule, book them, and get them insurance and verify to get them into your schedule will also, if you have your laptop open while you're talking, so say you're mic'd up or something, you have the patient. This is where physical therapists are going to be excited. As you talk back and forth with the patient, it will write your note for you. So your initial evaluation, all your stuff will be done. So for me, my first thought was like one of the biggest reasons for why I had to stop treating patients and then work more on the business was because the documentation, I was just falling so far behind. So I couldn't keep up with it. So the reality is like people will be able to treat more patients more effectively without writing notes. How many physical therapists listening to this would be like, oh my God, I don't have to write notes anymore? It'd be a big change for people. So the ROI initially is not there. The ROI on that software was more on the booking side. And then the third one is what we're going to talk more about is the follow up. So, I mean, Owen, you know this thing about missed patient reports, right? Or MIA reports, and how many physical therapists actually call their people? How many physical therapists actually do that? How many front desk people do it?
Everything you're talking about, I'm thinking of my days like running like
Yes. Yeah.
PT brick and mortar clinics. And I was like, this is always the stuff that the manager was just sitting there saying, like, did you do this? Or oh yep, that
Yes.
felt we had like a percentage that we just knew would be just like leakage because it was like the PT
Exactly.
either wouldn't call or the front office was busy and they had a phone call so they couldn't call.
We can all
Um,
agree that there's nothing worse than leakage, right? I mean, come on now.
I mean, come on.
Had to throw it in, had to say
Oh man.
it.
I'm talking financial terms, and you're over here being
He
disgusting.
said it. He did it. Owen did it, not me. I
All right,
caught it.
all
But to your
right. So
point, I'm
yes,
sorry, just to cut you,
you're
to
good.
cut you off with immaturity
Blew it up.
was
All
more to
right.
your point. What you're saying, and that's what's actually interesting is that stuff. It will lead nurture our call. So say it comes straight on, it plugs into all of our CRMs to a point where then what will happen is we originally our biggest problem when it comes to fitness is our lead nurture ability. So our
Yeah.
ability to just like we get leads, but then they eventually call them, book them, get them talked about the speed to lead. AI doesn't need to take bathroom breaks. AI is not teaching classes. AI doesn't need to take off the weekends. It'll call people at 1 a.m. It'll call them at 12. It doesn't care. Right. So the reality of that is it follows up with the leads. It'll also follow up all the past people that haven't showed up to meetings, haven't showed up. It can, and again, sounds like a real person. So a lot of the tasks it's going to replace are billing stuff and also like, we're billing stuff and then also front desk work. And so a lot of it, your point about the managers is it's going to take a lot of pressure off the mundane tasks that PTs get pissed about, which I think is really good for the profession. So the hope is in general, those are three major places, billing, scheduling, and then follow-ups and front desk and all that stuff and dealing with leads that I think is going to be monster changes with AI coming.
Well, and these are the things that I think, looking at those 3 points, right? And, thanks for kind of telling us these are some of the things that maybe you see an ad on LinkedIn if you're a
Yeah.
solopreneur, but, you don't really know what the hell they're talking about. Um, it makes sense too because the patient really cares about the relationship with the therapist, right? Like that cannot be AI. They will leave for that. But a lot of patients don't really care who's calling them on the phone, right? A lot,
Yes.
there's call centers, right? Some of the big companies use just a call center in the middle of like Iowa to schedule everything, right? So they don't really care who's calling them for their appointments, follow-ups, all that. I will say one of the things that I would wonder is maybe that phone call of like, why didn't you show up? Right. Sometimes that might close a little bit better with the PT. But again, if you look at how many calls aren't made,
100%.
like, yes, it'd be great if the PT came, but like, we've all been there. We've all been PTs. We're like, dude, I got notes and I want to like leave for the weekend. Like, I'm not going to
100%.
call Mrs. Smith. Like, she can figure it out herself. So let's say I do 0 out of 20, right?
Yes.
Callbacks. Well, this thing calls all 20. And
Exactly.
then, okay, of those 20, they're like, well, why can't Owen call me? Right. But if I still get 5, that's better for the business owner. Right.
Well, and the same thing here is you can train. Here's the thing that's the big kicker with AI. AI is only going to get better. So the
Yeah.
reality is, as you train the AI more and more and more, it'll only get stronger at what you want it to do. So
Yeah.
say you're like, hey, when it talks to Mrs. Smith, and Mrs. Smith says, well, why didn't Owen call me? You can say, you know what? If you'd like, I can request and figure out a time. And even this is the kicker for like a solopreneur, because this is going to be different for like staff PTs. No problem. If you want, I can have Owen call you and he can set up a time. Would that be okay with you? Right.
Yeah.
Or you can say, hey, if you want, I can my job is just to get you on the phone. If you want, I can transfer you to Owen right now.
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's
Perfect.
so much difference that you can train it to do different things. Hey, if you're interested, the clinic's open. I can have you go to the front desk and do, you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
so many aspects that it can do. It will never get angry either. One of the things I think happens with all the MIA calls is there's a lot of high volume phone calls that people get frustrated about having to do. And the
Yeah.
reality is, my biggest new concern that I didn't think about was the sheer volume it can do. I'm actually worried about my phone bills because I'm thinking about like these things get charged a little differently. So the reality is like we might go from a couple $100 across our company for like phone calls from humans to like thousands. And so all of a sudden we're like, oh crap, like that's a baked in cost we didn't realize might happen. But
Yeah.
again, if you can think about what that would do, you'll be able to measure back. And again, when people talk on some of these podcasts that we're hearing, I mean, you and I are talking about this, like the Medicare stuff and the blah, blah, blahs, when it comes to like how AI will impact. This
Yeah.
is the real way that AI and businesses will make a lot of money and mainly automate stuff and make, more importantly, our profession way more fun and tolerable. Think
Yeah.
about this, guys. You may not have to write notes again. You won't have to worry about denials on a regular basis. You'll interact a little less with different people that you don't want to interact with. How many PTs get frustrated with the front desk, or the front desk gets frustrated with PTs? You're going to reduce that amount.
Yeah.
More nonsense of like, I have to call my MIAs and like on a Friday, right? Like all that stuff. What'll happen instead is everything will be tied towards like the AI and working with the AI to do that. And you can train it to do whatever you want. It'll do whatever you want without pushing back on you. So to
Well,
me, there's a lot of really cool ways it's going to improve our lives. And here's the reality. The reality is that will make PTs more efficient. So in a 40-minute model
yeah.
like we have, I could, you know what I mean? If no one has to do anything, people aren't going to complain that they had to treat 12 patients. They're gonna be
Yeah.
like, I treated 12 patients, but I didn't have to do any documentation. That's why people complain about being so busy. They're like, well, I got to write 12 notes now, and 2 of them are evals, and I got to do it in another 2 hours of documentation in the back end. I get
Yeah.
it. I was there. I'm a PT. I was a PT too. But the reality of it is that could all be fixed with AI. So it's going to eliminate a lot of this crap that we don't like as physical therapists, potentially. And we're going to be able to focus on the things that AI can do, which is doing soft tissue, interacting with clients, creating that relationship, right? Doing exercise stuff, right? For those people. So that to me is going to be a huge change.
Well, and it's actually doing our jobs, right? And physicians have been doing this for years, and PTs for some reason don't want to do this. And I mean, I understand, right? But physicians, since I've ever been practicing, their job is 10 minutes with a patient. And they go in, they go out, they solve the problem. Great. This is what you need to do. Bye. They don't intake them. They don't, set them up in the room, take their blood pressure, anything like that. Now, PTs think, again, we don't, it's not basic stuff like that. Techs and doing exercises are actually kind of part of, there's a skill to that. So I agree, I don't think PT will ever go like that, but other professions have been doing this and offloading those menial tasks way more than we ever have, right? Because they could with another person. Now the nice part here is, the doctor still got to do the documentation, but like they're always complaining about, oh, the front office isn't doing this and all that. So there's going to be some bumps in the road, and I mean, I'd love to see what the regulators have to say about, putting a microphone between you and the patient and having everything written down. You're either going to have patients who don't want that, regulators who don't want that, or both. But at least if you can cut down, a third of your patients who are cool with it, that'll help, right?
Yeah, it'll be
Um,
interesting to see how that goes. To your point. I mean, again, we're not looking to implement that just yet because the problem is the ROI is not there, right? So people saying, oh, well,
yeah,
it'll make your PTs happier. Yeah, but the problem is it's not going to make my bottom line better just yet. I
yeah,
think I think what's smart is that a lot of AIs are understanding that, like the companies, and what they're doing is they're saying, well, we'll also do the MIA calls for you, also the scheduling calls for you. So I'm like, this
yeah.
only works if you connect. And then how do they plug in EMR? How do they do that stuff, right? So a
Well, and
lot
I
of it
think
is
that'll
there's certain
help.
EMRs that are coming out with that too.
Well, I think that'll help the PTs. I remember we had a few clinics that their biggest concern was actually scheduling. They were like, yeah, okay, I got to do the notes, whatever. But they were getting so pissed with like, somebody calling last minute and then that didn't get filled. So they're just sitting around, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or they would have, two things like something double booked because, the front office was sick that day and like the other office had to handle two clinics. Um, those types of things, I think that'll help just, how the PTs feel anyway. And then, I mean, I do this as a mobile PT. It's great. You talk at types, right? The basic Apple stuff, right? I'm driving along. I press the record button and I just say, this is what happened. It is so much nicer of a note writing process. So if you can even get something into that where the PTs just go into the back and talk and then it drops it magically into the exact place on the notes. That's going to be even better than,
Yeah, to your point, I remember back
that was
when I was doing
dictation for a physician.
I know. I was gonna say I've only had one place that ever saw dictation, and that was in a hospital when I was in Vermont. And what a disaster that was! Because what ended up happening was I remember dictating to you're dictating to somebody who's trying to like type, and I was like, what a pain in the ass. Like that job's eliminated instantly, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's probably already been eliminated. So when you think about that, like you're dictating into that note so they can write it, but then you're still going to double check that note to make sure it's good. You're talking about the regulation.
Yeah.
So the reality, it's going to be the same type of thing. It's like AI will just have to be more of a closed loop in that capacity. That's what'll be interesting about these companies that are coming out. But yeah, man, it's pretty cool what I think AI is going to do. I think it's really going to transform our profession for the better. And I love this quote. I love this quote, and I'll try and land our plane here. So, Mike, the quote that I tell people is AI will not replace us. It will not replace what we're doing, but someone using AI will. So in that standpoint, like that's the way you got to look at it, is you got to learn this stuff and be on the forefront of it. Otherwise it's going to leave you behind. And that's the problem. So again, if you're interested in learning more about this stuff, how it's going to impact what we can do, how it can really help you, join our mentorship group and our mastermind group. Happy to share more of the secrets of this kind of stuff and how it's going to really impact and what those companies are and whatnot. So physio-growth.com. Check us out.
And with that, we're done, my friend.
Cool.
Have a good one.
You too. See ya.
See ya.